I'm Carolyn Pursuti with the VOA Special English Technology Report. A powerful earthquake struck the northeastern coast of Japan at 2:46 p.m. local time on March 11th. Japan's meteorological agency released its first tsunami warnings just 3 minutes later. The country has one of the best earthquake early warning systems in the world. There are more than 4,000 seismic intensity meters in place throughout Japan to measure earthquake activity. These meters provide information within 2 minutes of an earthquake happening. Information about the strength and the center of the earthquake can be learned within 3 minutes. Kostas Sinalakis is a tsunami expert with the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. He said Japan is one of the most well-prepared countries on Earth in terms of tsunami warning. He said they had a warning. I think what went wrong is that they had not anticipated the size of this event. He said there are 2 reasons for this. Japan has not had any event anywhere near as big as this one in the last 150 years. And scientists had not expected such a large earthquake happening off the coast of Japan. The 9.0 magnitude earthquake was the 4th most powerful earthquake ever recorded worldwide. It was also the worst earthquake ever to hit Japan. The tsunami waves that followed were reported to have reached as high as 13 meters in some areas. Kostas Sinalakis said Japan's concrete seawalls were not built to handle such high waves. He said the concrete seawalls in many places in Japan are about 10 meters. That's about 33 feet. In Sendai, they were about 3 meters. That's about 10 feet. So that shows you that at least in that area, they were not expecting such a sizable wave. A tsunami wave can travel as fast as 800 kilometers per hour. To get to higher ground, people would often have to travel for many kilometers. This can take more time than a fast-traveling tsunami will permit. This is especially true in cases like Japan, where the center of the earthquake struck so close to the coastline. The tsunami waves followed almost immediately. Experts say early warning systems will continue to be limited by these facts until earthquakes and tsunamis can be predicted. For VOA Special English, I'm Carolyn Pursuti.
Is the VOA Special English Development Report. Humanitarian aid groups have promised to continue their work in Afghanistan after militants murdered 10 medical aid workers August 5th. Officials say the 7 men and 3 women worked for the Christian aid group International Assistance Mission. They were returning to Kabul after a trip to Nuristan province to provide medical care and supplies. Those killed were 6 Americans, 1 German, 1 Briton, and 2 Afghans. The Taliban claimed responsibility for the attack. It accused the aid workers of being spies and spreading Christianity. Violence against aid workers has increased in recent years, even though international laws are supposed to protect them. 17 aid workers were killed in the first half of this year in Afghanistan. 19 others were kidnapped. In Pakistan, 7 aid workers from the Christian group World Vision were killed during an attack on their office in March. Officials believe militants were responsible for the attack. The Humanitarian Policy Group has been studying violence against aid workers for more than 10 years. The group released its latest report on the issue last year. Abby Stoddard works with the international research group Humanitarian Outcomes. She helped write the policy group report. The report says that in 2008, 260 humanitarian aid workers were killed, kidnapped, or seriously injured in violent attacks. This was the highest number of incidents since the group began doing the research 12 years ago. Mrs. Stoddard says more than 60% of the incidents took place in 3 countries. She said there has been an increase in major attacks against aid workers. But this has been driven by the extremely violent environments in Afghanistan, Somalia, and Sudan, especially the Darfur area of Sudan. Sri Lanka, Chad, Iraq, and Pakistan also had many cases of violence against aid workers. Abby Stoddard says ongoing conflicts in the countries increase the risk of violence against aid workers. Mrs. Stoddard called the recent murders in Afghanistan horrific, but she said they are not uncommon. She says incidents involving nationals instead of foreigners do not get the same level of attention. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report. You can comment on this report at our website, voaspecialenglish.com. The VOA Special English Technology Report. Have you ever heard of Joseph Kony? Chances are you have at least heard about a video called Kony 2012. An American nonprofit group posted it on YouTube in early March. The half-hour video quickly went viral with tens of millions of views. The group Invisible Children created Kony 2012 to bring attention to Joseph Kony and his Lord's Resistance Army in Central Africa. In the video, Jason Russell from Invisible Children says, "For 26 years, Kony has been kidnapping children into his rebel group, the LRA, turning the girls into sex slaves and the boys into child soldiers." The group hopes the video will lead to his capture before the end of the year. Many people praise Kony 2012 for bringing attention to the issue, but others have criticized it and accused the creators of seeking financial gain. Critics say the way some of the information is presented may be misleading. Louisa Lombard is a graduate student in Duke University's Department of Cultural Anthropology. Ms. Lombard has studied conflict and policy in Africa. She says much of the information presented in the video is old. She says viewers get the impression that this is a northern Ugandan problem. In fact, she says, the LRA has not been operating in northern Uganda for years. They moved first to South Sudan, then on to the Democratic Republic of Congo and into the Central African Republic. Where they are now is debatable, Ms. Lombard says. The Ugandan government had a similar reaction to the video. In a statement, the government thanked the international community for its interest in Joseph Kony and the LRA, but it made clear that the group had not been active in Uganda since 2006. Uganda says the LRA is no longer a major threat and that the group now has less than 300 members. Paul Levinson is a professor of communication and media studies at Fordham University in New York. He says the important thing about the video is that it brings attention to Joseph Kony and the LRA. In his words, if it's slightly off in a fact or two, that's a very, very minor criticism. On March 15th, Jason Russell was hospitalized after San Diego police found him in his underwear, following reports that he had been naked and screaming in the streets. The head of Invisible Children said the filmmaker was suffering from exhaustion, dehydration, and malnutrition. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal. For more technology news, for people learning English, go to voaspecialenglish.com. The VOA Special English Technology Report. A new study looks at privacy in a world where computers can increasingly recognize faces in a crowd or online. Alessandro Acquisti at Carnegie Mellon University's Hines College in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, led the study. Professor Acquisti says social networks like Facebook and LinkedIn represent some of the world's largest databases of identities. He sees increasing threats to privacy in facial recognition software and cloud computing, the ability to store huge amounts of information in data centers. The convergence of all these technologies, face recognition, social networks, cloud computing, and all these advances in data mining are creating this world where you can blend together online and offline data. You can start from an anonymous face and end up with sensitive inferences about that person. Recognition systems measure things like the size and position of a nose, the distance between the eyes, and the shape of cheekbones. The software compares lots of images to try to identify the person. Facial recognition programs are used in police and security operations, but the software is increasingly popular in other uses, including social media sites. For the study, the Carnegie Mellon team used software from Pittsburgh Pattern Recognition, or PitPat. Google bought that company last month. The software can recognize faces in photos and videos. The researchers did 3 experiments. First, they collected profile photos from a dating website. Its users try to protect their privacy by not listing their real name. But comparing their photos to pictures on Facebook identified 1 out of 10 people. In the second experiment, the Carnegie Mellon researchers asked permission to take pictures of students on campus. They compared these to photos on Facebook. This time, they correctly identified 1/3 of the students. In the third experiment, they tried to see how much they could learn about people just from a photo. They found not only names, but birth dates, personal interests, and even locations when people listed them. And Professor Acquisti says face recognizers keep improving. In June, Facebook launched a facial recognition system to help users tag or list the names of people in photos. Germany became the first country to declare this software a violation of privacy. For VOA Special English, I'm Alex Villarreal.
Is the VOA Special English Development Report. Scientists continue to seek better weapons against malaria. Each year, the number of cases is in the hundreds of millions worldwide. About 1 million people die, most of them in Africa. Economic losses from the disease amount to an estimated 1% of the African economy each year. George Demopoulos is an associate professor at the Johns Hopkins Malaria Research Institute in Baltimore, Maryland. He says 42% of the Earth's population live in areas where malaria-transmitting mosquitoes exist. All of these people are at risk of being infected with malaria. He says the sad thing is that the majority of people who are killed by malaria are children. This is because their immune systems are not strong enough to fight the infection. Malaria is caused by a parasite called Plasmodium. The organism is injected into people through the bite of infected mosquitoes. Malaria can be treated, but in many areas, the parasites have become resistant to different drugs. George Demopoulos and his team are studying ways to make mosquitoes resist infection by the parasite. There are hundreds of kinds of mosquitoes in the world. Most do not spread malaria. Some have immune systems that kill Plasmodium. He says researchers are interested in the immune reactions that are responsible for killing the malaria parasite. The researchers have developed a way to make genetic changes in the 3 mosquito species known to spread malaria. The changes cause their systems to attack the parasite, blocking its development. Other researchers are working on ways to spread these genetically modified insects among mosquito populations. Professor Demopoulos says there is still a long way to go, but current malaria research is highly promising. A new vaccine is in final testing. So far, it has proven effective at preventing the disease in half of those vaccinated, which is more than ever before. And at the Malaria Institute at Macha in Zambia, researchers are developing an easier way to identify malaria. The test uses saliva instead of blood to diagnose the infection. Current efforts in malaria control are mainly based on the use of insecticide sprays and treated bed nets. But George Demopoulos says malaria needs to be attacked with drugs, vaccines, and bed nets, and with whatever researchers can develop. And that's the VOA Special English Development Report.